Thanks again. Come on up. You're thin enough to fit through that gap.
I've been walking.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Always kind of weird. You know, mayors love infrastructure. Send us healthcare and immigration. Are you leaving? Okay. Yeah, it's March 1, 2, 3, I think. Yeah, we're the 2 cities. Yeah. I've been happy with it. Yeah. It's if nothing else, it's engaged the business community and our city planners all in looking. They got our attention, and there's funding that comes with it, you know. So. I see. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hi. Thank you. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming by. What'd y'all get here? Yeah. Well, very busy. And of course, the surprise in November put us on a new track and kind of bewilderment. We don't know what to expect next. I think there's some ups, you know, kind of the general consensus. Even I don't know where we're headed, you know, in a lot of areas. I think it's going to be jobs, jobs, jobs.
All right, good morning. Let's go ahead and get started. I know we still have some people coming in. Feel free to move up front. We still have some empty space. A lot easier to connect with an audience when they're compact as opposed to being so spread out. And we have a lot of really good information and excitement about today's plenary session. So we'd welcome the chance to be better engaged. We're going to start with reporting on the progress of our Mayor's Dollar-Wise campaign. It is appropriately called Dollar-Wise Mayors for Financial Literacy, but I think we all recognize how important it is. We're trying to increase access to financial education to all Americans, and we want to thank the hundreds of mayors who have seen this to be a worthwhile program and have participated in the Dollar-Wise campaign. April is Dollar-Wise month, and this year Dollar-Wise is going to be urging mayors to promote free tax assistance programs as well as financial education, and doing all of this in both English and a second language. We're also going to be working on prison reentry, and I know every mayor is inspired about doing a better job in that area, and also public housing initiatives, another universal issue that mayors can put their teeth on. Well, Dollar-Wise is encouraging mayors to participate by holding events in these areas and these cities to be a part of the story of public tax assistance, and in obviously the months of March and early April. And they're also urging mayors to sign up and register for the 6th annual Summer Youth Contest, in which youth can win iPads and other prizes, and for completing an online curriculum on the internet. Since 2012, this has been a very successful program. We've had over 8,000 youth from over 150 cities participate in the Dollar-Wise contest, and we're hoping to increase that number this year. So I first want to thank Mayor Joe Kilsheimer from East Orange, Mayor Lester Taylor, Lansing Mayor Verge Bonero, and Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum, who are among the many mayors who personally presented prizes to winning youth last summer. It's easy to participate in this campaign. You just register for the Dollar-Wise campaign at bedollarwise.org. That's bedollarwise.org. All right, let's get started by announcing the winners of this year's award. Dollar-Wise is awarding this year the Innovation and Summer Youth Grants to 5 cities, and this will bring the total number to 64. And we'd like to thank the Bank of America Charitable Foundation for making these grants possible, and invite Steve Fitzgerald to join me on stage. Each of these winners is going to receive a Dollar-Wise grant in the amount of $10,000. Looks like Steve's coming up. And our first winner is Mayor Jim Gray of Lexington, Kentucky. I know Jim's not here today, but we have a staff member, Jamie Emmons is here. So Jamie, come on up. Lexington is going to use this innovation grant to provide financial education training to participate in its Global Lex Center. That's a local community organization that provides ESL training and other services to Lexington's immigrant communities in over 154 different languages. So on behalf of Mayor Gray, let's hear it for the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Jamie Emmons. Can you see us back here? Button my coat. All right. All right. Thanks very much. All right. Our second winner is Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C., and those of you that were here on Tuesday will know that we presented Mayor Bowser with her award, which is going to go to the Mayor's Prison Reentry Program. Our third winner is Mayor John McNally of Youngstown, Ohio, and Youngstown is going to receive an innovation grant. Mayor McNally is here. This is going to provide financial education and entrepreneurship training to re-entering residents participating in the Youngstown Metropolitan Housing Authority. Let's hear it from Mayor McNally.
Well, good morning, everyone, and on behalf of all my residents and my city council in Youngstown, Ohio, I want to say thank you very much to the Bank of America folks and Steve Fitzgerald, and of course Dollar-Wise and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Our initiative, which is focused on our Youngstown Metropolitan Housing Authority, combines not only folks coming back into our facilities in the Housing Authority, but works on our community initiative to reduce violence, our fatherhood initiative, and our Women of Worth program, all focusing on financial literacy and entrepreneurship. And over the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to have especially a lot of young women who are coming back into our community get more financially literate, be able to start their own businesses, and when they say thank you, that really makes my job that much more worthwhile on an everyday basis. So again, thanks to everybody here at the conference and the Bank of America. Thank you.
All right, now on to this year's Summer Youth Campaign grant winners. Our first winner is Mayor Joe Kilsheimer in the city of Apopka, Florida, who has a program called Youth Works. It's going to create a mobile app that are going to help youth track their spending so they can learn more about smart money management. And Mayor Kilsheimer is here. Mayor, come on up. Who wants to imitate Mayor Kilsheimer? All right, looks like we have no takers. Well, there was going to be a few words from Mayor Kilsheimer. I'm sure he said thank you very much, and I'd like to thank Steve. Appreciate it. Okay. This is probably a better method anyway. All right, our second winner is Mayor Eric Garcetti and the City of Los Angeles, who have a program called Financial Services Corps, and within its Hire LA Youth Program, which is going to empower underserved youth through peer-to-peer financial consulting year-round. And accepting the award on behalf of Mayor Garcetti is the Mayor's Press Secretary, George Kavork. And George, come on up and we'll take a picture. Come on up. Thank you. And Steve, would you love to say a few words about this program? Steve Fitzgerald.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Cornett, especially. It's great to be with everybody today. And as Mayor Cornett mentioned, Bank of America has been the founding sponsor of the DollarWise program. We've been doing this since 2004, reaching 64 cities, as was mentioned. And it really is in keeping with our company's mission really to help make people's financial lives better. It's core to our strategy, and as we think about the issues that our cities and our mayors are working with around equipping their young men and women, individuals who are pursuing their dream of homeownership, taking on that first job, one of the key underpinnings is having a solid foundation on financial literacy. And that's what DollarWise really has been all about for over a decade. And it really is part of our core strategy to meet people where their needs and meet them at their point of need to really create economic mobility. And I think when we can do that, that's how we begin to create opportunity, build pathways to success for individuals in our cities, and create stronger economies, which then benefits us as a company. And so we have been extremely pleased to be part of this program over the last 12 years. Want to congratulate all of the previous cities and thank all the mayors for all your hard work in this important initiative. And we look forward to your participation in 2017 and 2018 as we continue to launch the innovation grants, the summer youth grants. And in closing, congratulations again to all the cities today. We are extremely proud of this partnership because we recognize that the importance of this work really begins with our cities and our mayors leading that work. So on behalf of Bank of America and all of my teammates across the country who have worked so closely with the mayors in these cities, thank you very much. And we look forward to the next round of winners for the Summer Youth and Innovation Grants. Thank you.
All right. And thanks to Steve and the Bank of America's Charitable Foundation for all their support. All right, I'd now like to call your attention to the inaugural U.S. Conference of Mayors IHS Smart City Survey. It should be on your tables, so take a moment to locate that, just so all know that you're following along. Okay, it looks like everybody's figured out where that is. We plan on beginning an annual survey to track the development of smart city projects in cities over the years. And we owe Greg Fisher, the mayor of Louisville, a big round of thanks for this. He heads up our metro economies and the new American city, and also San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee, who's the chair of our Technology and Innovation Task Force. They have spearheaded this effort. All right, so take that with you when you leave. We're also excited this morning to continue our successful partnership with Scott's Miracle-Gro Company. They're helping us to improve our nation's cities through gardens and green space development. This year's winning city is going to receive a 3-year grant totaling $40,000. The Grow 1,000 Gardens and Green Spaces Grant Awards program was created to promote and recognize mayoral leadership in this area. So let me call on Sue Locke. She's the Director of Corporate and Community Partnerships at the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company, and she's going to help me announce this year's winning city. Sue?
All right. Thank you, Mayor Cornett. It's always an honor and a privilege to be a part of the annual winter meeting. So through the partnership with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the Scott's Miracle-Gro Foundation is very, very proud of the work of the Grow 1000 program. So since the implementation of Grow 1000, we have awarded close to $2 million in grants supporting 830 projects across the United States, in every state. We also have 64,000 youth who have been participating in our programs, and those kids have helped revitalize close to 11 million square feet of green space that has been revitalized and refurbished. And on an annual basis, 266,000 pounds of food has been donated to pantries across the country. So again, those are very impressive statistics that we're very proud of. But really, when you get to the heart of Grow 1000, that's just part of the message. It really is about the people and the partnerships, friendships that we formed in every city that we've touched over the last 7 years through the program. And there are so many individual stories. I could stand up here and recount so many of them to you. But again, it's about the people and how Grow 1000 has touched and changed their lives. So whether it's Natasha in New York City, who is just 12 years old, but she's already fighting food injustice in her East Harlem community. Or Nathaniel, who is a millennial from Tallahassee, Florida, who is bringing an urban farm with roosters and everything to the Frenchtown community there in Florida. Or whether it's Pam, who is from Rochester, New York, and Pam just has so much energy about making food available, more healthy food options to her community in Rochester. Or also Laura, who is a principal at a school in Houston, and she just wants to have her kids have the opportunity to play on a natural playscape, not some concrete plastic structure. So again, I could stand up here and just give countless stories, but this is really the heart of the Grow 1000 program. And this is something that, again, that we're also so very proud of, how people their lives are being transformed and touched through a garden. And so for 2017, the winners are not going to disappoint. These projects have been innovative, they're inspiring, and again, I keep using the word transformative. So we're very proud of the winners. And so on to the winners for 2017. And we'd like all the mayors to come up. We're going to do a check presentation and also a photo. So the recipient of a $40,000 Grow 1000 grant for 2017 are New Bedford, Massachusetts, Mayor John Mitchell and the Abolition Row Park. New Haven, Connecticut, Mayor Tony Harp, Cherry Ann Park. Rochester Hills, Michigan, Mayor Brian Barnett and the Hill Sensory Garden. And Santa Monica, California, Mayor Ted Winter and the Ishihara Park. So let's give a round of applause to all of this year's winners.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the support. We're really happy with this project. Congrats, man. Congratulations.
Okay. Congratulations, everybody. All right. Help us.
We've got the rest of the Scots team here. There you go. And we check everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Go that way, please. All right.
And also, I just want to say thank you again to Tom Cochran and the staff at the Conference of Mayors, Crystal Swan, Jerry Powell, Juby Headley, and Joan Krieger. You've just been always great to work with. So thank you again.
Well, congratulations to all the winners. And it is now my pleasure to introduce perhaps America's foremost expert on walkability. Jeff Speck's latest book is Walkable Cities, How Downtown Can Save America One Step at a Time. And backing up and a little bit of personal history between Jeff and myself, you know, I met Jeff probably 10, 12 years ago when I didn't have much information or knowledge or even really have developed an opinion on subjects like walkability. In Oklahoma City, where I grew up, we drove. And that just seemed to be the way it is. And I realized upon examination and in looking at the obesity rates in my city that the built environment was a significant problem that had helped us lead to this kind of unhealthy culture, and the built environment needed to be changed. Well, easier said than done. I mean, changing the built environment kind of seems like one of the largest obstacles you could possibly create for yourself. But I knew the first thing we had to do is kind of talk to our citizens and even let them know we had a problem. Because if you live in Oklahoma City and you drive your car, you probably didn't notice that there was absolutely no way to walk across the street in downtown Oklahoma City safely. Or did people consider downtown even a place where they might want to experience or stay longer than they had to? When a position is not pedestrian friendly, people tend to see how fast they can leave that place or how fast they can get in and out of it. And so Oklahoma City was probably an extreme example, and you know, I think there was probably some reluctance on Jeff even to look at Oklahoma City because, you know, there's just so much you can do, you know, to a place when it wants to do better, but the challenge is so large. How do you piece it together? But I want to say I give Jeff a lot of credit in coming into our city, kind of serving as the change agent, not only helping me to identify the problem, but being able to defend the reasons for changing it, the successes that would occur if it could be successfully changed, and then ultimately, I think we became, you know, creative and found ways to fund a complete reformation of our downtown area. So Jeff's work in Oklahoma City is extraordinary, but he has also duplicated this success in his private business in cities and towns, medium size, small size, large size, all across the country. So he was very generous to give us his time to come in today and to kind of walk us through some of the changes he sees that are necessary in America if we hope to create the pedestrian-friendly communities that we desire. We also know that with the autonomous vehicle and its implementation, that's also going to affect city planning, and people that are experts on downtown and walkability like Jeff Speck obviously have opinions in this area about the steps we ought to be looking forward to as we prepare for the autonomous age that's upon us. So with that, please welcome Jeff Speck to the stage.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Well, thank you, Mayor Cornett. It's an honor to be introduced by you again, and to a group that I've wanted to talk to since 2004 when I attended my very first winter meeting here. At that time, I was representing the National Endowment for the Arts, and I heard Mayor Riley talk about the Mayor's Institute on City Design. Helping run that program over 4 years, including through Hurricane Katrina, was how I got to know and admire Tom Cochran and Tom McClyman, who I'd also like to thank for including me today. Can I interrupt to say this is my first time on a teleprompter ever, and I'm a little nervous about it. But I have like an hour and a half of speech for you, and to do it in 20 minutes, which I will, to do it in 20 minutes, I needed to write it down. But if it's at any comfort, I wrote the script myself at the Winter White House in Mar-a-Lago. So my brief talk today is called Autonomous Vehicles and the Good City, 10 Rules for Mayors. And I should say I was asked to talk about autonomous vehicles because I heard this is something you all want to hear more about. And I know in my conversations with cities, after we stop talking about parking, which is what everyone talks about, we move right on to autonomous vehicles and what do they mean for our cities. So I put this together just for you all. Before I let Mayor Cornett off the hook, I should put a little meat on the bones of our relationship because I learned some lessons in Oklahoma City that helped me think about the problem of self-driving cars. Mostly that the car is a great servant but a brutal master. When Mayor Cornett was new to office, Oklahoma City was named by Prevention Magazine as the least walkable city in America. And rather than letting that stick, Mayor Cornett and his team, with my help, launched an effort to rebuild all 40 blocks of streets in their downtown core. I had found that many of the driving lanes just weren't needed. And by right-sizing the streets to meet the real demand, we were able to calm traffic, double the amount of on-street parking, and add a ton of trees and create a robust cycling network where there had been none before. And 10 years later, this is the project that I'm still the most proud of. I also want to acknowledge all the other mayors still in office who I've worked for in the last decade. I know at least some of you are here today, so thanks. And I also would acknowledge the mayors like Mayor Kotz, who I met through the Mayor's Institute on City Design. Who here has participated in a Mayor's Institute on City Design? If you haven't, look to the person near you whose hand is up and ask them about it, because it's really a fantastic program that you would all enjoy a lot. I learn more from mayors than from anyone else, and I can say with some confidence that I've learned from the best. I'm also grateful to Ford for sponsoring this meeting. Almost coincidentally, I gave a Ford-sponsored TED Talk 2 weeks ago at the Detroit Auto Show. The highlight there was a dinner picking the brains of Jim Hackett and Laura Merling, who are leading Ford's autonomous vehicles effort. I hope the Ford representatives here today are not disappointed by my talk. Hi, Jessica, wherever you are. But in case they are, I want to make it clear that while I see as much danger as promise in AVs, what I saw over that dinner was two leaders with a profound sense of corporate responsibility who want to see their technology have the most positive impact on America and the world. Ford is trying to do the right thing. But I will make clear in the next 20 minutes it's not going to be easy. For them and for us, the city with AVs, if the city with AVs is to be better than the city without them, then there's a lot of work to be done. In a sense, this is speculative fiction, but we city planners and transportation planners have been talking about this now for several years, and with their help, I've come up with 10 rules that I think are likely to be essential if we're to benefit from this technology. Especially helpful to me were Paul Moore of Nelson Nygaard, which is America's best transportation planning firm by a long shot, and Jarrett Walker, the author of the wonderful book Human Transit, and one of our leading transportation thinkers. Here's what we came up with. Number one, be afraid. One of my favorite books of all time is by the philosopher Neil Postman. It's called Technopoly, The Surrender of Culture to Technology. In it, Postman describes what he calls the technological imperative, which means, at least to me, that new technologies that increase convenience are unstoppable, whatever their impact on our long-term quality of life. It happened with our cars. Enthusiastic adoption, followed by some dubious outcomes. These include the doubling of the percentage of our income that we spend on transportation to travel no faster in cities than we used to with a horse and buggy. The drowning of our coastal cities from climate change. The transformation of so much of the American public realm into an unmitigated soul-sucking eyesore. The mortification of our bodies through inactivity brought on by the elimination of the useful walk, as Mayor Cornett talked about, and the loss at last count of 38,000 American lives each year in car crashes. Now, none of this was planned. The technology won, and it will again. This last item represents, for many of us, the key argument in favor of autonomous vehicles. If adopted en masse, they will save hundreds of thousands of lives, so many that the organ donation industry is worried. Additionally, we can expect that so much urban land will be made available for other uses since we no longer will need as much parking. You will no longer need to pay your parking fee before existing. That seems to have no downside. But as I will try to show, these two positives can very quickly be offset if we're not careful. That leads to rule number 2, be realistic, which I'm also calling what to expect when you're expecting AVs. That reminds us that major change is unlikely to happen within a decade or several. I don't know how long you plan on being mayor, but it's likely to not happen. It's likely to happen after that. Notice even that Ford, in this vision that they produced, is talking about decades and decades from now. Other industry experts think that full autonomy actually won't happen at all. And that's a problem because most of the benefits of AVs only really kick in once we have full autonomy, a swarming fleet of shared vehicles that operates as a public good. This challenge was well described by Robin Chase, the founder of Zipcar, who describes autonomy as a heaven or hell scenario. Heaven is fleets of shared electric driverless cars powered by renewable energy, and a more socialist wealth distribution system to help all the drivers put out of work buy those cars. Hell, on the other hand, is privately owned AVs that, since they have nowhere to park, spend much of the day circling, doubling the traffic load. Now, I'm only 53, but I've been an American long enough to know that a fleet of publicly owned AVs does not constitute freedom. We have shown at the national and state levels absolutely zero propensity to control how people buy or use their cars. European cities, like Barcelona, might create large car-free zones or close 2/3 of their streets to through traffic, but not even New York City was able to pull off congestion-based toll pricing. So in terms of ownership, do you actually think someone's going to tell that dude from the Cadillac EV commercial that he can't have his own AV and take it wherever he wants, whenever he wants? I don't. So suddenly swarming becomes almost impossible, and this guy can still run his Mercedes through Des Moines at Mach 2.5, even if he's slaloming through AVs the whole way, which he might very well hit. So perhaps the lives saved by AVs won't be as many as we anticipate. A realistic understanding of what AVs are likely to mean in America leads to many of the rules that follow, including Rule 3, decide how much traffic you want. This is probably the key rule because a simple understanding of economics makes it hard to avoid reaching the conclusion that AVs will result in a ton more driving. If they cut the cost of driving by 80% as anticipated, that's supposed to add 60% more trips to city streets that are already at capacity. That's what's got Mayor Bloomberg up in arms and pointing the way towards a lot of regulation, intervention, and new policy to avert disaster. But it's actually worse than 60% for a number of reasons. The biggest one is called induced traffic, or the fundamental law of traffic congestion. If you ignore induced demand, 60% more trips are not a problem, as long as we have swarming. Elon Musk tells us that a driving lane full of swarming AVs can handle 3 times as many cars as it does today. So problem solved, until you realize that these days traffic congestion is the principal constraint to driving. Because driving is already so subsidized, we do it as much as we can unless we're punished by traffic. Induced traffic is why highway expansions never work. Traffic engineering theory is straightforward. A street is congested because the number of drivers, shown here in yellow, exceeds its capacity. If you enlarge the street, you will eliminate congestion. Unfortunately, what happens instead is that the number of drivers quickly increases to match the increased capacity, and congestion returns in full force. These are the drivers who are taking transit, carpooling, commuting off-peak, or simply not driving because they didn't want to be stuck in traffic. When the traffic went away, they changed their habits. Maybe they moved further away from work as the time cost of their commute went down. Unfortunately, thanks to them and others like them, it couldn't last. This law applies to city streets as well as highways. And it's particularly bad in third world countries where the poor have lots of time and the rich have drivers so they can get stuff done while they're stuck in traffic. This becomes especially alarming when we realize that AVs will make driving cheaper in two ways, money and time. You will pay less per mile, and you won't mind sitting in gridlock as you work or watch cat videos. What to do about this huge likely increase in vehicles? The only answer, I believe, is to regulate it, not with laws, but with lanes. Without a commitment to limiting capacity, all our parking lanes, soon empty, will not become bike lanes and greenways as promised, but more driving lanes, and sidewalks will feel miserable. The right solution is to make the streets what you want them to be. Since cars will be more efficient, you can commit to no increase in driving lanes, maybe even get rid of a bunch. You can convert parking lanes to bike lanes and to express bus lanes, which will still be needed as the AVs reach their natural state of equilibrium, which we know from the law of induced traffic will be congestion. Making the streets we want was a hallmark of the Bloomberg administration, where Jeanette Sadiq-Khan oversaw the creation of an amazing bike network and many great public spaces by putting driving lanes to better use. This is what Mayor Bloomberg means when he says the battle is to create a space in which the question is not how we get ready for self-driving cars, but rather what kind of city we want. Rule number 4 is the other natural outcome of cheaper cars, which is plan for more sprawl pressure. I recently saw this ad in a kiosk in Boston's Copley Square, and my heart fell out of my chest. Here was a Lyft ad ostensibly for last-mile service complementing our rail network. But I'll be darned if it wasn't an exact map of suburban sprawl. Now, I've been fighting sprawl for nearly a quarter century with limited success, and everyone knows that it's a function of 4 main factors: highways, mortgage programs, local subsidies, and racism. But mostly highways. Before the car, land development was mostly nodal, mostly around rail stops, and therefore walkable. Only with the car did the entire landscape become equivalent, and development began to take the wasteful and unwalkable, disconnected forms that now, more than anything else, characterize the American landscape. But there is recent good news, if learning that you have a crippling disease can be called good news, which is that the cities and towns have begun to figure out that sprawl does not pay for itself. As many of you with sprawling cities can attest, the tax revenue from low-density sprawl is not enough to replace roads and pipes once they fail. For this reason, we can hope that the next great inducement to national sprawl, cheap autonomous automobiles, will not have as great an impact as universal car ownership did. But this is only a hope, which is why this may be the one category where policy may be the most needed. Given national and state-level tendencies, this policy can mostly only happen at the local level, which is why I would direct you to Smart Growth America, the nonprofit agency that is your best resource for smart growth policy. Rule number 5 is understand transit geometry. It has come to the attention of many of us in this business that most of the discussion around AVs seems to adhere to only to some of the laws of physics. What is often misunderstood is simple geometry, how many people fit in a vehicle. Even if they swarm and are small, AVs are cars, and since they'll be used by Americans, most can be expected to hold only one rider. Here are 200 people in 177 cars. They fill the street to the horizon. Here they are on bikes, here they are on buses, and here they are in a streetcar. There's no getting around the fact that low-occupancy vehicles are a tremendous waste of street space. It doesn't matter if the vehicle is conventional, electric, or autonomous. Geometry prevails. This is why when the Brooklyn Bridge was converted from part rail to all car in 1948, it went from carrying 400,000 people a day to carrying only 170,000 people a day. It's why a single L train in New York carries as many people per hour as 2,000 cars, and an articulated bus equals 100 cars. Autonomous cars are a great supplement to transit, but in congested places, they are not a solution to transit. That's why Ford is also investing in autonomous buses. Which leads to Rule 6, don't rob transit. This may be the greatest risk. In congested cities, replacing trains and buses with autonomous cars will cripple mobility. Now, if you're a city with no congestion, a very small transit population too, AVs may present a solution. If you are Davenport, Iowa, my wife's hometown, moving your transit investment into a voucher system may eventually make sense. But if you're Des Moines or even Iowa City, it does not make sense. Unfortunately, just the prospect of future AVs is already threatening transit investment in certain American cities. The Mountain View City Council just voted down dedicated BRT lanes on El Camino Real, due in part to the expectations of AVs making buses obsolete. The Michigan's Taxpayer Alliance and others are picking up on AVs and Uber as the last great weapon to finally kill transit, and even DC's Metro is threatened. Meanwhile, Uber, unlike Lyft, has set its sights on transit and is offering Uber Pool monthly memberships at a lower cost than transit memberships, passes in some places, and some say that's to put the conventional transit system out of business. Uber admits that this pricing is well below cost and unsustainable, and that by definition is predatory. So as city leaders, mayors have a responsibility to teach their citizens about geometry, to teach them what even Elon Musk doesn't seem to know, which is that a shift from transit to AV cars represents a reduction in mobility. Rule 7, own the streets and the data. It sounds implausible, but there is a very real worry that AV providers will ask to buy certain city streets or certain segments of city streets, and cities will take the money. This has precedents, like Chicago leasing its on-street parking to Morgan Stanley for 75 years, and these precedents are all regretted. We need to remember that your city's streets are its principal public spaces, and especially downtown, they perform many more jobs than just moving vehicles. They're places to walk, bike, access buildings, dine, converse, grow trees, protest, and much more, and they belong to us all. I particularly like this quote that Adam Gopnik recently wrote in the New Yorker. Cities are their streets. Streets are not a city's veins, but it's neurology, it's accumulated intelligence. You mustn't sell that. Getting more wonky for a minute, the other big issue on ownership, already a big deal, has to do with traffic data collected by Uber, which cities can benefit from in many ways. For example, knowing which way to send a fire truck. Jeanette Sadiq-Khan is one of many who take issue correctly with Uber's very partial data sharing. Like Uber's, AVs will represent a viable business model only by running on public streets. Sharing full data would seem a small price to pay for that privilege. Now, here's my favorite rule, rule number 8. Don't buy any urban vision that forgets urbanism. If you study modern urban history, you will see that every major transportation advance has brought with it whole new concepts of what the city is. We are a creative species, and we can't help but use any excuse to reinvent the human habitat. The problem is that all these inventions, from Le Corbusier's tower in the park to Frank Lloyd Wright's Broadacre City, have turned out to make our lives worse, and we've had to come crawling back from them. What works best for humans is this traditional city of streets, blocks, and squares. It has survived largely unchanged for millennia, and for good reason. Traditional urbanism was not an invention, but evolved naturally in response to the human needs, and the adoption of AVs should not allow us to replace it with something different. If Jessica from Ford will forgive me, I'm going to return to this image, which discusses the improved walkability of the AV-enabled city. Well, you know, I wrote the book on walkability, and if you think about it, you'll agree that nobody willingly walks on an empty, windswept highway overpass. Similarly, nobody walks, here barely visible at the center, between boring bushes and a 6-lane highway. This is where people walk, and it hasn't changed for 3,000 years. So we can't let the AVs trick us into thinking anything different. Rule 9, unify around set policy demands. As we wind up this list, let's move forward into action. I'm so excited to be giving this talk to this group because you all have the power, if you act collectively, to determine the future. As I've suggested, there are a number of ways that cities will need to regulate AVs if they're to be a boon and not a bane. These include owning the data, protecting transit, prohibiting empty circling trips, setting speed limits, and the like. City by city, you each have almost no sway here, especially if you're acting in competition to see who can get the AVs first so you can all be cool like Pittsburgh. But working together, you can't be denied. Collectively, you can all create a protocol that you present to AV providers as a collective requirement. Such an effort has already begun at NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. They have some sway, but they don't own the streets like you do. NACTO's list is a good start, but it needs refinement and expansion. Where better to center such an effort than at the U.S. Conference of Mayors? Could this be your next task force? If you do it, I'll be glad to help. Finally, Rule 10, invest now in the current technological revolution. Now, I'll admit here that I cheated a bit. I'm a city planner. I'm not an AV expert. It's not often that a city planner gets to give a talk to this many mayors at once, so I couldn't resist bringing up what I call the biggest city planning revolution currently underway in only some American cities. It's a transportation revolution. It's upon us now rather than in 2030 or beyond, like AVs. What if I were to tell you that there was a transportation technology available now that outperformed AVs by almost every measure, that traveled 50 to 80 times further per calorie expended than the automobile, that required very little space, that could drive on existing infrastructure with minimal modification, that didn't pollute, that made its users healthier, happier, and skinnier? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that technology exists, and more than half of you own it already. It's called a bicycle. And while the bicycle is not new, what is new to the U.S. is a whole bunch of new, great bike infrastructure, like the protected bike lane, that has been shown to be much more effective than conventional bike lanes at growing cycling populations. When a protected bike lane was inserted in Brooklyn's Prospect Park West, the number of cyclists tripled, speeding went from 75% of all users to 17%, injury crashes to all users dropped by 63%, and there was no negative impact on the road capacity for cars, even though it lost a lane. There was, of course, a lawsuit, this being New York, but it's over now. Protected bike lanes are what you need to give a sense of security to the civilian bicyclist. Without them, all you get is mammals, middle-aged men in Lycra. With them, you get millennials, you get tech companies, and you get these folks. This picture was taken 1 block east of here on the 15th Street protected bike lane, a place that you should visit. And with a lot of good bike lanes, you get Copenhagen, where 4 times as many people bike than drive. Imagine that. And we're talking about autonomous vehicles. Why? Tom and Tom, forgive me, excuse me. Jessica from Ford, forgive me. But autonomous vehicles are the right answer to the wrong question. Why do we all, even MIT's Media Lab and Google, keep asking how we can make cars better? Where has that ever gotten us? The proper question is, how can we provide the most useful mobility to the most people with the most positive outcomes for society? The answer includes cars, but it also includes trains, buses, bikes, and walking, especially biking and especially walking. If you guys ever invite me back again after this, I would love to talk to you about that. If any of you want to continue this conversation, I can be reached at jeffspeck.com. There's a handout you all have that summarizes this talk. Also, I teach a 2-day course at Harvard every summer, and I would love to see some of you there. This year, it is June 22nd through 23rd. And, of course, I'm on Twitter, Jeff Speck, AICP. I would love to talk to some of you there. Thank you all so much for listening. Thanks again to Mayor Cornett for the invitation. Thank you.
Well, I've always believed that a good speaker can inform, interpret, and entertain. And I think Jeff Speck deserves another round of applause for hitting all 3 of those points. Thank you very much. All right. You are adjourned, and we've given you a lot to think about. So we'll see you a little later.